So I think it's really easy to get discouraged in life, especially whenever you're doing anything that's difficult. And I think that whenever you're doing any kind of creative act or anything that may or may not work out, anytime you're experimenting, anytime you're doing any of these things, there's always this tendency to want to give up. Because things are difficult, life is hard, and sometimes you think to yourself that it would be so much easier if I weren't doing this, whatever exactly that is. You may think to yourself, oh, life would be easier if I weren't an artist, or if I weren't trying to start my own business. For me, there have been times in my life where I've wondered if things would be easier or better if I stopped making videos. I've wondered about whether or not I should stop writing. And typically speaking, I think, as I was saying, you tend to have these sorts of thoughts whenever things are difficult, whenever things are hard, whenever you're not seeing the fruits of your labors, whenever you're not seeing any kind of success. Because of course, whenever things are good, whenever the sun is shining and whenever the wind is blowing and you feel the breeze in your hair, whenever life is wonderful, then it's really easy to enjoy things. Whenever it feels like everything is going for you, then it's really easy to feel like you're going in the right direction. And this is some kind of sign from the universe that things are meant to work out. But of course, whenever things are difficult, whenever you run into pitfalls or trials, or whenever you make mistakes, that's when you start questioning yourself and your decisions. That's when you start wondering, was it a mistake to try this at all? So anytime I feel like giving up, anytime I feel like quitting, there's always one question I ask myself, which is, what would I be doing if not this? If I weren't doing this thing, whatever it is, then what would take its place? Because oftentimes things are perfect in our imagination. We look at our problems and we think to ourselves that things would be so much better if we just cut off whatever it was that was causing these problems. And sometimes that's absolutely true. Sometimes there are points where you should just stop whatever it is you're doing and cut your losses and move on. But I think that oftentimes there are just points in life where things are just hard, and that's the way it is. And if something is difficult, if you're not seeing the success you want to see, that doesn't necessarily mean you should give up. Sometimes it does mean that. There are times where I think that it's necessary to just move on when something isn't working. But before you do that, before you give up or move on, I think it's important to ask this question: what would I be doing if not this? What would I be doing if I gave up writing? What would I be doing if I gave up video making? Because speaking from my perspective, I've realized before that whenever I've asked myself this, there isn't always a clear, better thing to do. And I think that it's important to ask yourself this question before you give anything up. What would I be doing if not this thing? Because oftentimes whenever you cut something out of your life, there's a void there that gets filled with whatever is easiest to fill it with. So for instance, after I immediately graduated from college, there was a void. Whenever I was going to school, my days were very structured. I had these classes at these times, and I had these times available to do homework. But then immediately after graduation, all of a sudden that structure is kind of ripped away and taken away. Oftentimes the void will be filled by whatever is easiest to fill it with, especially if you're not careful. And so as I'm saying, I think it's really important to fill the void. And I think that voids in our lives are very difficult to deal with. Oftentimes our lives are structured the way they are because it's our best attempt at filling the void. We all have 24 hours in a day, but oftentimes, at least for myself, I tend to waste several hours a day. And when I say that I tend to waste time, I mean that by my own definition. I mean that I waste it like on my phone, or I waste it doing stupid stuff that I don't need to be doing. There are times when I have errands to run or chores to do, I have work to do, and I don't always do it. I think there are times when you just need a break. There are times when you need rest days or you need vacation. I think it's hard or maybe even impossible to be in tip-top shape 24/7. But I do think that sometimes we can get into this mentality of the grass is always greener when sometimes it isn't. I think that there are times when commitment can be scary, and I don't even mean in a relationship sense, I just mean commitment to a hobby or commitment to a challenge. At least speaking for myself, I tend to experience this FOMO, this fear of missing out. I'll see where some people do challenges, and then I'll always ask the question, well, they've committed to doing this thing, whatever it is, but what if something better comes along? I remember seeing this interview where Burt McCracken, the lead singer of The Used, was talking about getting back into reading because he had been into reading as a kid. His mom was a school teacher, but then as he got older, he got out of it. And if I'm not mistaken, then I think that he was in the process of going to AA and breaking his alcoholism and drug addiction and stuff like that. So he needed something to fill the void with, and so he got back into the habit of reading. And there's an interview where he tells a story about how he read Carrie by Stephen King, and then after that, he committed to reading Stephen King's entire bibliography in order. And so I remember seeing that and thinking that that was insane. Stephen King is one of the most prolific writers out there. The dude writes 1 to 2 books on average every year, and he's done so for the last like 50 or 60 years since the early 70s. And on top of that, some of his books are super long. Like It, I think, is like 1,100 pages long. And also on top of that, I think that Stephen King can be hit or miss sometimes, so I don't really like the idea of committing to reading each of his books because some of his works are better than others. But really, the entire reason I found Burt McCracken's challenge to himself, his goal of reading every Stephen King book, the reason I found that so scary was because of this question in the back of my head: what if he's missing out on other stuff? Because whenever you commit yourself to one thing, you're closing yourself off to other things. Because essentially this dude said that he was going to read 100 Stephen King novels in order, which in my mind meant that he wouldn't be reading 100 other novels that could have been better. And so again, this goes back to that FOMO I was talking about. It's that fear of missing out. The thought of me committing myself to reading all of Stephen King's books in order scares the crap out of me because, again, there are other books out there. But then later on, whenever I thought about Burt McCracken and his example of choosing this set of books to read, I thought about it from his perspective and I saw it from his eyes. And I asked myself the question, if he weren't doing this, then what else would he be doing? And again, one answer was that, he could have been reading 100 other books. But then also, as I said, if I'm not mistaken, then he was using reading as a way to keep him from falling back into addiction. And so if your choices are to either read Stephen King's entire bibliography and stay focused that way, or to potentially relapse, then it's kind of obvious which choice is better. And then in that same interview, he talked about how he read all those Stephen King books and then he just kept on reading and he loved it. And then he got into all these other things and he ended up reading like Orwell and McCarthy and Gravity's Rainbow and all this other stuff. And so I think that speaks to a really important truth, which is that even if things are difficult right now, it can lead you on to better things. It can lead you on to better habits. So to give you a clear example of what I'm talking about, as I mentioned earlier, I've asked myself the question, should I give up video making? And then so far my answer has been no, I should not give up video making because so far nothing better has come along. So far there isn't a clear and obvious thing that would fill the void that video making would leave behind for me. But the thing is that I know that if the day ever comes along when I find something better than video making, then I'll be able to take these habits that I've built up with regards to video making and I'll be able to transfer them over to whatever the new thing is. A couple of years ago, I committed to doing a video a week. And there have been breaks I've taken, there have been weeks I've missed because I was sick or because I just didn't feel like it or something like that. But for the most part, I've done on average a video a week. And so there's a lot that I've learned through committing to this. And going back to this idea of FOMO, it was scared to start that. It was scared to commit myself to doing one video a week because the question always came along in my mind, what if something better comes along? But then also that's like a what if question. What if something better comes along? It's like, okay, well, what if it does? Then I go and I do it, I guess. But then the reverse of the question is, what if something better doesn't come along? And it's like, well, if nothing better comes along, then I will be in a pretty good place if I just keep on making videos. And so I think that for you, whoever you are, if you ever start questioning your actions and what you're doing, if you ever have those moments where you start questioning if this is the right thing to be doing, whatever it is, then I think you have to ask the question, what would I be doing if not this? I think that question is important because it forces you to give a concrete answer to the question. Because if you ask your question, what if something better comes along? That's kind of vague, that's kind of imaginary. Whereas the question, what would I be doing if not this, forces you to truly think about your action and whether or not it's the best thing for you. One last thing I want to touch on is this idea that the time will pass anyway. I remember seeing this comment some time ago where it was someone in their late 30s, I think, who said that they were thinking about going back to school for their master's or their doctorate, but they were discouraged from doing so because they would be in their early 40s by the time they completed their degree. And then someone just replied to them saying that the time will pass anyway. In a few years, you're going to be in your early 40s no matter what. But the difference is that you can either choose to not have a degree or you can choose to have a degree. And so I think that's another thing that's really important to keep in mind, just that the time is going to pass anyway. Each one of us makes decisions every day and we have to learn to live with those actions and the consequences of them. So looking at it from my perspective right now, either I can choose to make videos and a year from now, I will have more videos, or I choose to not make videos and a year from now, I will not have any more videos. But if there's nothing there to replace it, then there will inevitably be a void. And just a year from now, I will look back and I will think to myself that I've wasted time. And so in conclusion, before you ever give up on anything, ask yourself the question, what would I be doing if not this? And again, there are times when you should give up. There are times when it's best to move on to something new. But I don't think that's always the case. I think there are plenty of times when you just feel discouraged because things aren't going well, but quitting won't necessarily solve your problems. And if anything, there are times when quitting can make your problems only worse. So in essence, I'm just saying to be careful about your decisions and always ask yourself that question. If I weren't doing this, whatever this is, then what else would I be doing? If I weren't reading all the Stephen King novels in order, then what else would I be doing? If I didn't commit to making a video a week, what else would I be doing? If I weren't trying to write, what else would I be doing? What else would I fill my time with? But anyways, this has been my video. Thank you for watching. Have a nice night. Think about your decisions carefully before you make them. So, thank you for watching. Goodbye.